Let me ask the most important question. You guys are from Portugal, both born
Yeah.
in Portugal.
Yeah.
So, who is the greatest soccer player, footballer of all time?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit biased on this topic, but I mean,
Is it Maradona?
I have a tremendous respect for what
Here we go.
This
is the political.
We can convince you.
I mean, I have tremendous respect for what Ronaldo has achieved in his career, and I think soccer is one of those sports where I think you can get to maybe be one of the best players in the world, if you just have like natural talent, and even if you don't put a lot of hard work and discipline into soccer, you can be one of the best players in the world. And I think Ronaldo is kind of like, of course, he's naturally talented, but he
Cristiano
also
Ronaldo should say the football from
exactly
Portugal.
from Portugal, and not the Brazilian in this case. And so and Ronaldo came from nothing. He is known from being probably one of the hardest working athletes in the game. And I see that sometimes a lot of these discussions about the best player, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards this person is naturally talented and the other person has to work hard. And so as if it was bad if he had to work hard to be good at something. Yeah. And I think that I think so many people fall into that trap. And the reason why so many people fall into that trap is because if you're saying that someone is good and achieved a lot of success by working hard, as opposed to achieving success because he has some sort of God-given natural talent that you can't explain why the person was born with that. Yeah. What does it tell you about you? It tells you that maybe if you work hard on a lot of fields, you could accomplish a lot of great things. And I think that's hard to digest for a lot of people. And
so in that way, Ronaldo's inspiring. That
I think so.
So you find hard work inspiring, but he's way too good looking. That's not. Maybe that's the. I don't like him. Probably.
No, I like the part of the hard work and of him being like one of the hardest working athletes in soccer.
So he is to you the greatest of all time. Is he up there? Is he would be number? Okay. Do you
agree
with this?
Wholeheartedly.
Disagree?
Well, I definitely disagree. I mean, I like him very much. He works hard. I admire. He's an incredible goal scorer, right? But so first of all, Leo Messi, and there was some confusion because I've kept saying Maradona is my favorite player, but I think Leo has surpassed them. So it's Messi, then Maradona, then Pele for me. But the reason is there's certain aesthetic definitions of beauty that I admire, whether it came by hard work or through God-given talent or through anything. It doesn't really matter to me. There's certain aesthetic genius when I see it, to me. And especially, it doesn't have to be consistent. It is in the case of Messi, in the case of Ronaldo, but just even moments of genius, which is where Maradona really shines.
Even if that doesn't translate into results and goals being scored.
Right. And that's the challenge. I like how you did that. Because that's where people that tell me that Leo Messi's never, even on strong teams, have led the national team. People aspire to the World Cup, right? As really important. And to me, no, it's the moment. Like, winning to me was never important. What's more important is the moments of genius. But you're talking to the human story, and Cristiano Ronaldo definitely has a beautiful human story.
Yeah, and I think you can't. For me, it's hard to decouple those two. I don't just look at the list of achievements, but I like how he got there and how he keeps pushing the boundaries at almost 40.
Yeah,
and how that sets up an example. Like maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have ever imagined that one of the top players in the world could be a top player at 37 or.
But and there's an interesting the human story is really important. But if you look at Ronaldo, he's somebody kids could aspire to be. But at the same time, I also like Maradona, who is a tragic figure in many ways. It's the drugs, the temper. All of those things, that's beautiful too. I don't necessarily think, to me,
the flaws
are beautiful too in athletes. I don't think you need to be perfect.
I agree.
From a personality perspective, those flaws are also beautiful. So, but yeah, there is something about hard work, and there's also something about the being an underdog and being able to carry a team. That's an argument for Maradona. I don't know if you can make that argument for Messi and Ronaldo either, because they've all played on superstar teams for most of their lives. So I don't know how it's difficult to know how they would do when they had to work, like did what Maradona had to do to carry a team on his shoulders.
True.
And Pele did as well, and so, depending on the context.
Yeah. Maybe you could argue that with the Portuguese national team, but we have a good team. But maybe what Maradona did with Naples and a couple other teams, it's incredible.
It speaks to the beauty of the game that we're talking about all these different players that have, or especially if you're comparing Messi and Ronaldo, that have such different styles of play, and also even their bodies are so different, and but these two very different players can be at the top of the game, and there are not a lot of other sports where you have that. Like you have kind of a mental image of a basketball player, and like the top basketball players kind of fit that mental image, and they look a certain way, and but for soccer it's not so much like that, and I think that's beautiful, but that really adds something to the sport.
Well, do you play soccer yourself? Have you played that in your life? What do you find beautiful about the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'd say it's the biggest sport in Portugal, and so growing up we played a lot.
Did you see the paper from Deep Mind? I didn't look at it, where they're like doing some analysis on soccer strategy.
Yeah,
interesting.
I saved that paper. I haven't read it yet. It's actually I when I was in college, I actually did some research on applying machine learning and statistics in sports. And in our case, we're doing it for basketball. But what they're effectively trying to do was, have you ever watched Moneyball? Yeah, so they're trying to do something similar to, right? Taking that, in this case, basketball, taking a statistical approach to basketball. The interesting thing there is that baseball is much more about having these discrete events that happen kind of in similar conditions, and so it's easier to take a statistical approach to it. Whereas basketball, it's a much more dynamic game. It's harder to measure. It's hard to replicate these conditions, and so you have to think about it in a slightly different way. And so we were doing work on that and working like with the Celtics to analyze the data that they had. Like they had these cameras in the arena that were tracking the players, and so they had a ton of data, but they didn't really know what to do with it. And so we were doing work on that. And soccer is maybe even a step further. It's right. It's a game where you don't have as many. In basketball, you have a lot of field goals, and so you can measure success. Soccer, it's more of a Poisson process almost, where it's like you have a goal or two in a game.
In terms of metrics, I wonder if there's a way, and I've actually thought about this in the past, never coming up with any good solution. If there's a way to definitively say whether it's Messi or Ronaldo are the greatest of all time, like honestly, sort of measure, like convert the game of soccer into metrics, like you said, baseball, but like those moments of genius, if it's just about goals or passes that led to goals, that feels like it doesn't capture the genius of the play.
Yeah, there'll be like you kind of do. You have more metrics, for instance, in chess, right? And you can try to understand how hard of a move that was. There's like Bobby Fischer has this move that I think it's called the move of the century, where you have to go so deep into the tree to understand that was the right move, and you can quantify how hard it was. So it'd be interesting to try to think of those type of metrics, but say for soccer.
And computer vision unlocks some of that for us. That's one possibility.
I have a cool idea, a computer vision product, Lex, that you could build for soccer.
Let's go. I'm taking notes.
If you could detect the ball and imagine that, it seems like totally doable right now, but if you could detect when the ball enters one of the goals and like just had like a crowd cheering for you when you're playing soccer with your friends every time you score a goal, or you had like the Champions League song going on,
Yeah.
and like having that, like you go play soccer with your friends, you just turn that on, and there's like a computer vision like program analyzing
Detects the ball.
detects the ball every time there's a goal.
cheers.
Like if you miss, like there's the fans are reacting to that.
And then
It should be pretty simple by now. It's like I think there's an opportunity there. It's like
Yeah.
just throwing that.
I'm gonna go all out.
Startup
But by
idea.
the way, I did. I've never released. I was thinking of just putting it on GitHub, but I did write exactly that, which is the trackers for the players, for the bodies of the player. This is the hard part actually. The detection of player bodies and the ball is not hard. What's hard is very like robust tracking through time of each of those. So I wrote a tracker that's pretty damn good. Is
that open source? You open source?
I know I've never released it
Okay, interesting.
because I thought like I need to. I would. This is the perfection thing because I knew it was going to be like it's going to pull me in, and it wasn't really that done. And so I've never actually been a part of a GitHub project where it's like really active development, and I didn't want to make it. I knew there's a non-zero probability that it will become my life for like a half a year. That's cause just how much I love soccer and all those kinds of things, and ultimately it will be all for just the joy of analyzing the game, which I'm all for.
I remember you also like in one of the episodes you mentioned that you did also a lot of eye tracking analysis on
Yes.
like Joe Rogan's.
That was the research side of my life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you have that library, right? You kind of downloaded all the episodes.
Yep. Allegedly. I of course I didn't. If you're a lawyer and listening to this.
No, it is. I was listening to the episode where you mentioned that, and I was actually there was something that I might ask you for access to that to like, allegedly that library, but I was doing some not regarding like eye tracking, but I was playing around with analyzing the distribution of silences on one of the Joe Rogan episodes. So like I did that for the Elon conversation, where it's like you just take all the silences like after Joe asked a question and Elon responded, and you plot that distribution and see how that looks like.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity, especially with long form podcasts, to do that kind of analysis, bigger than Joe.
Exactly.
But
it has to be a fairly unedited podcast so that you don't cut the silence.
So one of the benefits I have doing this podcast is like the what we're recording today is there's individual audio that being recorded.
Makes it
so
easier.
like I have the raw information. Now, it's when it's published, it's all combined together, and individual video feeds. So even when you're listening, which I usually don't, I only show one video stream. I'll know. I can track your blinks and so on.
Interesting.
But ultimately, the hope is you don't need that raw data, because if you don't need the raw data for whatever analysis you're doing, you can then do a huge number of because it's quickly growing now. The number, especially comedians, there's quite a few comedians with long form podcasts, and they have a lot of facial expressions. They have a lot of fun and all those kinds of things, and it's prone for analysis.
And there's so many interesting things that idea actually sparked because I was watching a Q&A by Steve Jobs, and I think it was at MIT, and then people he did a talk there, and then the Q&A started and people started asking questions that I was working while listening to it, and someone asked a question and he goes on a 20-second silence before answering the question. I had to check if the video hadn't paused or something, and I was thinking about if that is a feature of a person, how long on average you take to respond to a question, and if it's
that's fascinating.
Has to do with how thoughtful you are, and if that changes over time.
But it also could be, this is a really fascinating metric, because it also could be, it's certainly a feature of a person, but it's also a function of the question.
True.
If you normalize to the person, you can probably infer a bunch of stuff about the question. So it's a nice flag. It's a really strong signal, the length of that silence relative to the usual silence they have. So one, the silence is a measure of how thoughtful they are. And two, the particular silence is a measure how
thoughtful the question was.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
I just analyzed Elon's episode, but I think there's room for exploration there.
I feel like the average for comedians would be like, I mean, the time would be so small because you're trained to like, think you're reacting to hecklers, you're reacting to all sorts of things. You have to be like so quick.
Maybe.
Yeah. But some of the greatest comedians are very good at sitting in the silence. I mean, there's Louis C.K. They play with that because you have a rhythm. And like Dave Chappelle, a comedian who did Joe's show recently, he has, especially when he's just having a conversation, he does long pauses. It's kind of cool because it's one of the ways to have people hang in your word is to play with the pauses, to play with the silences and the emphasis and like mid-sentence. There's a bunch of different things that it'd be interesting to really analyze, but still soccer to me is that one's fascinating. I just want a conclusive, definitive statement about, because like there are so many soccer highlights of both Messi and Ronaldo. I just feel like the raw data is there to have a definitive
and
statement.
decide.
Because you don't have that with Pelé and Maradona. Just
True.
Very
True.
But here's a huge amount of high def data. The annoying, the difficult thing, and this is really hard for tracking. And this is actually where I kind of gave up. Well, I didn't really give much effort, but I gave up to the way that highlights or usually a football match are filmed is they switch the camera. So they'll do a different switch of perspective. So you have to, it's a really interesting computer vision problem. When the perspective is switched, you still have a lot of overlap about the players, but the perspective is sufficiently different that you have to like recompute everything. So there's two ways to solve this. So one is doing it the full way where you're constantly doing the slam problem. You're doing a 3D reconstruction the whole time and projecting into that 3D world. But you could also, there could be some hacks that I wonder, like some trick where you can hop, like when the perspective shifts, do a high probability tracking hop from one object to another. But I thought, especially in exciting moments when you're passing players, like you're doing a single ball dribble across players and you switch perspective, which is when they often do when you're making a run on goal. If you switch a perspective, it feels like that's going to be really tricky to get right automatically.
But in that case, for instance, I feel like if somebody released that data set where it's like you just have all like this data set, a massive data set of all of these games from say Ronaldo and Messi, like, and you just add that in like whatever CSV format and some publicly available data set like that, I feel like people would just there would be so many cool things that you could do with it, and you just set it free, and then like the world would like do its thing, and then like interesting things would come out of it.
By the way, I have this data set. So the two things I've did of this scale is soccer, so it's body pose and ball tracking for soccer, and then it's pupil tracking and blink tracking for, it was Joe Rogan and a few other podcasts that I did. So those are the two data sets I have.
Did you analyze any of your podcasts?
No, I think I really started doing this podcast after doing that work, and it's difficult to. Maybe I'd be afraid of what I find. I'm already annoyed with my own voice and video, like editing it. But perhaps that's the honest thing to do. Because one useful thing about doing computer vision about myself is like, I know what I was thinking at the time. So you can start to like connect the behavioral peculiarities of like the way you blink, the way you squint, the way you close your eyes. Like, talking about details, it's like, for example, I just closed my eyes. Is that a blink or no? Like figuring that out in terms of timing, in terms of the blink dynamics is tricky. It's very doable. I think there's universal laws about what is a blink and what is a closed eye and all those things, plus makeup and eyelashes. I actually have annoyingly long eyelashes. So I remember when I was doing a lot of this work, I would cut off my eyelashes. Which especially it was funny, like female colleagues were like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, keep the eyelashes. But because it got in the way, made the computer vision a lot more difficult. But
Super interesting topics.
But speaking about the one, still on the topic of the data sets for sports, there's one paper that, and I actually annotated on Fermat, and it was published in 90s, I believe, 90s or 80s, I forget. But the researcher was effectively looking at the hot end phenomena in basketball, right? So whether like the fact that you just made a field goal, if on your next attempt, if you're more likely to make it or not. And it was super interesting because he polled like I think 100 undergrads in I think from Stanford and Cornell, and asking people like, do you think that you have a higher likelihood of making your free throw if you just made one? And I think it's like 68% said yes, they believe that. And then he looked at the data, and this was back in, as I said, like a few decades ago. And so I think he had a data set of about. He looked at it specifically for free throws, and he had a data set of about 5,000 free throws, and effectively what he found was that specifically in the case of free throws, he didn't, for the aggregate data, he didn't find that he couldn't really spot that correlation, that hot end correlation. So if you made the first one, you weren't more likely to make the second one. What he did find was that they were just better at the second one because you just got like maybe a tiny practice, and you attempted once, and then you're going to be better at the next one. And then I went, and there's a data set on Kaggle that has like 600,000 free throws, and I reran the same computations and confirmed, like, you can see a very clear pattern that they're just better at their second free throw.
That's interesting, because I think there's similar, like, that kind of analysis is so awesome, because I think with tennis they have like a fault, like when you serve, they have analysis of like, are you most likely to miss the second serve if you missed the first, obviously. I think that's the case. So that integrates. That's so cool when psychology is converted into metrics in that way. And in sports, it's especially cool because it's such a constrained system that you can really study human psychology, because it's repeated, it's constrained, so many things are controlled, which is something you rarely have in the wild psychological experiments. So it's cool. Plus, everyone loves it. Like, sports is really cool to analyze.
People actually care about the results.
Yeah. I still think, well, like I will definitely publish this work on Messi versus Ronaldo, and
I'd love to read it.
Objective, fully objective.
I'd love to peer review.
Yeah, this is very true. This will not pass peer review.